Welcome to FYI. I'm Barry ZeVAN. Good to see you again if you're resuming your viewing. If not, great to have you with us. My guest today is the mayor of Golden Valley, Minnesota, Shep Harris, who is also a fellow Rotarian, and just a joy to welcome you to the show, Shep.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Well, you've had quite a career. Golden Valley, for those who are watching, because this is also on YouTube, some people in other parts of the world are watching this. We have to say that Golden Valley is certainly golden for one of the world's most respected companies, most well-known, General Mills. I have a little anecdote. In really good times, we had a place in southern France, in Cannes, and at this residential hotel, and the concierge there, her name was Chantal Aurier, I'll never forget. And the first time we stayed, she said, "Oh, Minneapolis." She said, "Wheaties." Wheaties.
Right.
So she knew Wheaties. And then I told her I lived in the city where the headquarters for Wheaties was. That they don't make the Wheaties in that building, but
right.
but nonetheless. So she was very impressed. And heaven bless one of the marketing people who I knew at General Mills. They were then putting pictures of people on their Wheaties boxes, athletes and so forth. So I got a picture of Chantal, and
nice.
They put a picture of her on one box and then encased it in plastic. And so the next time I was over there, I brought her this with her picture on a Wheaties box. And
wow.
she thought, wow.
I bet she still has it.
Oh, probably, yeah. I think she has moved to Marseille, so I've been told. Anyway, that was many years ago. So what a joy to, I think it would be a joy to be a mayor. What about those who have political ambitions? First of all, where did it start for you? Your life, I know, started in New Orleans.
That's right, at the other end of the Mississippi. Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, I was born and raised in New Orleans, and right outside of New Orleans, and down there they have what are called parishes, not counties, thanks to the Catholic Church in the Archdiocese. And so I was born in Orleans Parish in New Orleans East, and after a few years my parents moved out to the suburbs to an area called Metairie, and right outside of New Orleans. But New Orleans is my home, my childhood home, and still visit because I have family there. And I was there till I graduated high school, went off to college in Washington, D.C., so I know that we have that in common as well. And there, after college and working on Capitol Hill for a couple of years, I happened to meet my wife and just decided to follow her out here so she could go to graduate school. And we're kind of stickers, It's like we came here and we decided after a couple of years, we thought this is a great place to grow some roots and raise a family.
Oh, it's wonderful. So how many years have you been in the Twin Cities?
It's 21 years now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's terrific. And you're only 23 years old.
Thank you. It's very kind of you. It's very kind of you. Yeah, I wish. I wish. I asked my son earlier today at school drop-off. He commented on how old my wife is, and I said, "And how old am I?" And he said, 29, and I said, "Correct."
That's right. Thank goodness he knows.
Right.
Well, you certainly look youthful, and it doesn't look as though the mayoral job has created any wrinkles.
Not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet. No, but it's been
How
good.
long have you been mayor, Shep?
It's been 7 years.
7 years.
Right. Yeah.
And the term is what, 4 years, is it?
Now it's a 4-year term. When I first ran, it was, I believe in 2011, it was the first full 4-year term. Prior to that, it actually had been, actually, I'm sorry, this was the second time. It used to be a 2-year term.
Yeah.
And so when I ran in 2011, I think it was actually the second time that there would be a 4-year term. So, but as far as we know, going forward, it's going to stay 4 years.
I've had the blessing to interview politicians in the past years, not only on this program and otherwise, from President Truman onward, but I still can't imagine, and this would be sharing, I think, some of the thoughts our viewers may have had, or may have, about the difficulty, really, of deciding to run for office and especially if you don't have any money, because really, one politician who is very well known, he once said to me, he said, "I wish money would never have to be a factor." He said, "But it's all about raising campaign money." That must be tough when you decide to make a decision. You say, "Oh boy, here we go."
Well, you have to be comfortable with asking not only people to support you, but yeah, in some cases you have to ask some people for some financial assistance. Fortunately, at the local level, there are ways, at least in Golden Valley and in other suburbs, there are ways through friends or family where you can get in-kind donations, and that does go a long way. And what I like, one of the things, many things I like about Golden Valley, but specifically for when it comes to elections and campaigning, I tell people, and I encourage people to run. It's a very character-building experience. I'll say that. I mean, you just like, I mean, you stick your neck out on the line with your name and your reputation over the years, and you do the same when you file for office for only $5. And but what I like a lot about Golden Valley for elections is it's all about door knocking. It's retail, face-to-face politics. It's meeting people in their neighborhoods. You can spend thousands of dollars on mailings and other types of materials, but really what's going to help the most is when you have those one-on-one conversations with people.
And the goal, of course, is to really and legitimately convince people that you really care about their lives, I would assume. And you have to prove it.
Well, it's not only caring about their lives, but it's also hearing their stories. And what I will say from time to time is, if we're doing something wrong at City Hall, tell us. It's the only way we're going to be able to make it a better community. And on the flip side, if we're doing something right, tell us, because we want to make sure we're not going to change it. So a lot of the work is about listening and communicating and advocating on behalf of residents to try to make the community better, and in some cases also build consensus around controversial issues.
When the city council meets, et cetera, I assume, and maybe this is naive to not know, I assume you talk about more than just things political, like the sewer system or the garbage collection or this, that, and the other. You would, in my opinion, I think you would have to also include topics like the fire department, the police department, things of that nature. There's a lot on that plate spinning. So it's not just walking into your mayoral office and sitting down and say, "Gee, this is a nice day."
Right. Well, one thing that is I think it's a challenge for some people to understand that there's local government, but it's not monolithic. There are different styles of local government, and you could see in a Minneapolis and a St. Paul where you have the mayor has a stronger, higher profile role along with the council. And but in places like Golden Valley, it's really a city council structure. So as I always say, I'm one of 5 people on the city council. A lot of people will come to me with suggestions or with criticisms or other opinions, and they'll say, "Do something about it." And I'll say, "Well, I can convey this to the other 4 members on the council, and if I think it's the right thing, if I think there's an opportunity for us to do something about it, then I'm happy to not just convey it, but advocate for it." But again, I'm one of 5. And what's also important too is at this level in Golden Valley, it's also about working with our city staff. We are very much like a nonprofit board. I am like the chair of the board, and the city council is the board, and our CEO is the city manager, and the CEO has a number of, has a COO and others to run the day-to-day operations. So there are a lot of items spinning on not just one plate, but multiple plates. And whether it's the fire department, whether it's the police department, it's our public works, physical development department. We have a beautiful new Brookview Community Center that opened up almost a year ago, $18.5 million facility. It takes a lot to run that very smoothly, and multiply that times 50 different issues on a daily basis. And earlier today I was over at the Purpose Center having conversations with them, and they were having conversations. We actually had 2 Purpose Center meetings, one at City Hall, one on another matter at Perpich Center. So there's always something moving, something good happening, but it takes a lot of people. It's not just one person.
You don't sleep much, do you?
I'll sleep in another lifetime.
I think it's phenomenal. So this really is a full-time position.
Well, it's not supposed to be. I have a day job. I'm a government relations professional. I do lobbying work at the state level, up at the state capitol, and I work I'm not a lawyer, but I work at a law firm which has a government relations group. And so with the exception of Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Duluth, by state law, all the other cities do not have full-time mayors.
Oh, wow.
So it's really what you put into it. The outgoing mayor of Rochester, Ardell Brady, he's retired. So he's had some additional time to put into the job. I probably put in about 15 to 20 hours per week, but that's primarily the only thing I do, besides just family time and work.
Those are jam-packed hours, too.
But it's worth it.
Absolutely. Probably a mundane question, but of course, when you moved from Metairie to D.C., there was definitely a change in the weather.
Oh, yes.
And so how does a person from the Deep South get used to blizzards and snowstorms and everything else?
Right, right. Well, I remember, I think it was the winter of 1995, or maybe 96, where I got stuck in Chicago for a few days, because in Washington, D.C., as you know, they're not as prepared as Minnesotans are. And so I think they've had a similar type of blizzard since then, or maybe two. And I don't think they have snow plows, or very few. So I got two, okay. They got smart, they finally got two. So I got a little acclimated, and then when we moved here, it definitely took a while, but growing up in New Orleans, there was almost an envy factor of, especially since my mom's originally from, she was born in Missouri but spent some of her childhood in Milwaukee. So there was always that envy factor of, I guess not so much grass, but I guess snow is greener on the other side. And so I've embraced it, and I've done things like cross-country skiing, and I love downhill alpine skiing, and I've even tried ski jumping once, and I didn't break anything, so that was a success. So I've embraced it, and I think even on the coldest days when we have, that horrible wind chill of below zero and it's -20, I just think of those really hot, humid days in New Orleans or even in Washington, D.C. And I think, yeah, this is better.
Well, it's much more healthful for you to be in cold. My wife, who is a native of the Twin Cities, said, yeah, we just never thaw out. That's why we're so healthy. And no germs can exist in that temperature. So
that's true.
So we'll hopefully all live for a long, long time. Yeah, it's funny, sidebar here with D.C. We lived in Potomac, Maryland, but the TV station at that time, which is now in Virginia, was on Connecticut Avenue. So I'd have to drive in, and I'd have to go down Albemarle Street. And Albemarle Street, for those not familiar, is about like this.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time there was a snowfall. Of course, there was nothing put down, no salt, no sand, no anything. And I slid down that hill, and I just kept praying that I didn't crash into somebody coming down Connecticut Avenue the other way. Oh, it just, if there's one snowflake in D.C., watch out. It's terrible.
I still have many vivid memories of during wintertime getting out and helping cab drivers, get them out of a jam, because we were trying to get somewhere in the cab to the metro, and we'd have to get out and help push the car out of the way of the cab to get moving because it got stuck.
Terrible.
Yeah.
And to be a TV weatherman in those days, well, any days in D.C. was, if there was going to be a snowstorm, watch out.
You kind of laugh at this because at one point in time I actually did think, rather of going into politics, and still am fascinated by meteorology. So I actually at one time thought about becoming a meteorologist.
Oh, you would have been great.
It would be fun. It'd be great to follow in footsteps like yours.
Oh, you're very kind. You're very kind.
Big footsteps to fill, but it'd be fun.
You're kind. I would have said pygmy footsteps there.
No.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, and maybe soon we'll see what happens about retro weathers.
Yes.
It'd be fun to do. It's been suggested, let's put it that way. Your background, your family background, your father was a lawyer. Did that have any influence on your interest in politics or in law or whatever?
It didn't. My father actually worked for Exxon, well now ExxonMobil. He was a defense attorney, so he kept quite busy defending and primarily dealing with safety issues, accidents that might happen out on the oil rigs or train derailments. So what really got me interested in politics was more, as a young child, I was fascinated about the media coverage in the Middle East. And then as I got into more social justice work involved in my high school youth group through my synagogue, and what really, I think, capped it off was in 1988, the former Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke was surprisingly elected to, he won the primary for a state house seat, and that really lit a fire under me. And I organized a number of local high school Jewish youth, and we teamed up behind the scenes with the Republican Party, and we were making phone calls to try to help the other Republican candidate beat David Duke. And that's what really got me going and connected me to Republicans, connected me to Democrats, and one thing led to another thing, and a couple of years later I'm interning for U.S. Senator J. Bennett Johnston in his re-election campaign, also against David Duke, or I should say David Duke against him, and then I went to school in Washington, D.C., and the rest is kind of history.
Wow. During your D.C. days, did you get a chance to spend quite a bit of time, or a little bit of time even on Capitol Hill with some of the senators and congressmen?
I did. I was very lucky. So through the volunteer work that I'd done, internship volunteer work that I'd done for Senator Johnston, I was able to get an internship there in his office. And then several years later, after I graduated from American University there in Washington, I was hired to be on his staff. And so I was able to do that for about a year and a half, and then he retired. And I jumped over to the House side, and I worked for Congresswoman Corrine Brown, who's still there, from the Jacksonville area of Florida. And so I was able to get a lot of exposure, and the stories that we hear out in the media out here, you usually hear a day or two beforehand. And so, and just, funny different moments and situations. I remember almost being accidentally trampled by Bill Bradley, but maybe that's because he's so tall and I'm so short. He didn't see me coming around the corner, things like that. Or playing baseball with, the former representative, but Milwaukee mayor. I'm drawing a blank on his name now, but just doing baseball practices with the House Democrats as they prepared for their annual baseball game, which Martin Sabo used to be, former congressman from here, used to be the manager of the Democrats team. So that's how I got to, even before I even thought about moving out here, that's how I got to know some of the DFLers out here.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Through his office, yeah.
Well, in my opinion, I only lived there a little over 3 years, but the staffers who I got to know, and through some of the senators and congressmen I got to know, people don't realize those people, some of them work 16 hours a day.
Oh, yeah.
They sleep in the offices.
Yeah.
And your tax dollars at work, well, it seems like, at least for plus 90%, maybe 95% of them and more, we're getting our money's worth.
Well, they go there. I still remember vividly the first day I walked off the metro at Union Station off of the Red Line and saw the Capitol there for my first day for the job, and I got a lump in my throat. I mean, a lot of people go there because we're patriotic, we're Americans, and we love our country, and we want to do what's best for our country and to serve our country in that way. And yeah, DC gets a bad rap when it comes to all the politics, but it's a beautiful city, it's a cultural city, it's an international city, and it's a beautiful place, it's a historic place, it's like a living museum. So in fact, I'm going back next month so my daughter can tour some area colleges.
Oh, good.
And so hopefully we'll take in maybe a free concert at an embassy, or maybe get into one of the Smithsonian museums.
That'd be marvelous. Yeah, I have two kind of minuscule connections. Well, maybe not so minuscule, but with the American University, your college, or your university, George Clooney's father, Nick, was teaching there.
Oh, I didn't know that.
After Nick retired from broadcasting, yeah. And then a fellow who just passed away recently was one of my dear friends with ABC named Barry Dunsmore, and Barry's daughter Leanne Dunsmore became one of the executives at American University.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah,
it's been a few years since I graduated from there, and so I know there's been a lot of turnover, and I think at this point probably most of the people who were my professors, who I just revered and enjoyed, have either retired or passed away. So she may have come after my time.
Yeah, well, that would have been, let's see, well, in the 1980s, probably.
Oh, well, that would have been before my time. So
yeah, Leanne, I know now lives in a Maryland suburb, which shall be nameless.
but it's a good university. It's a good campus, and I just love how it's about, and all the universities there, about how they use the city as a classroom.
Well, it is. You're right. Exactly. You can't go into that city. I always said we lived in Potomac outside the Beltway, but once you enter the Beltway, it's like it's the strength of a black hole in space. It just swallows you up.
It's very gravitational. Yes.
Yeah, and I mean the power. It's just a power city, and you know we're in a particular time we are now, but in those days, back in the 70s, it was an exciting power, more than a partisan power. This, that, and the other. It's always partisan, but this was. These were pretty strong days.
Yeah.
I got to know Potomac Fever, though. Sorry to digress here.
No, that's okay.
I got to know John Ehrlichman fairly well before he went to prison, and those were the days when I was on TV there just after Nixon resigned. But anyway, it was was interesting because John told me, he said, I want you to keep in touch with me because after I get out of prison, I'm going to be doing some fun stuff. So he got married, and we kept in touch. 3 letters I wrote to him, and he said, I'm going to move to Santa Fe, New Mexico. He said, and if you're ever out there, he said, well, come by. I think it's in my book. And so anyway, I happened to have to be in Albuquerque for something. And I called John, and I said, I'm gonna be there. He said, well, let's have breakfast. So we had breakfast at this restaurant. It's probably still there, called the Pink Adobe. Anybody watching in Santa Fe, if you are, have breakfast at the Pink Adobe. I won't charge for the commercial, but anyway, so he brought this book to breakfast, and he wouldn't show me the cover. So right after breakfast, he dramatically flipped it over, and it's Richard Nixon's memoirs. And he said, President Nixon sent this to me while I was in prison. It's down in Safford, Arizona. It's a minimum security prison. And he said, I want you to see how he signed it on the inside. So you know you read the book, but he flipped it over, and it was stamped Richard M. Nixon. Not to John, thank you very much, or to John, goodbye, or hello, or just stamped Richard M. Nixon. He said, that's what I went to prison for.
Right.
He said, never catch Potomac fever.
Yeah.
So.
It can be intoxicating. It really can be. And as I think the key is, I'll still remember, again, ironically, life I think is all about irony. And I was searching for a new job, and this was before I got hired by Congresswoman Corrine Brown. And I happened to be waiting for an elevator in one of the House office buildings, and it was Tim Penny, who had already announced that he was retiring and not running for re-election from the 1st Congressional District in Minnesota. And I introduced myself and told him what I was trying to do, and he said, "Don't forget your roots." Actually, he said, "Don't forget your ruts." And I always remembered that. And I think that no matter where you're from, if you go, wherever you go, if you remember your roots, you remember your values, and you stick to them, then hopefully you can fight off that you're inoculated from that Potomac fever. And I think for some people that works. For others, you know, it's that's what we see in terms of politics at its worst. But that's why I'm so involved at the local level, because I still think you can have a huge impact as an individual, not only as an elected official, but also just as an individual, as a resident, as a member of a community through community organizations like the Rotary. You can have a tremendous impact in influencing for the better what happens in your community. So when I hear people sometimes say, "Oh, you fight City Hall, but you can never win," I actually challenge them on that and say, "No, I'll give you plenty of examples, including the 10-year-old, I think they were 10, sister and brother who came to an open forum many years ago and said, 'We want to raise chickens.' And from that conversation to now, to today, you can raise chickens in Golden Valley."
Oh, wow.
It's just these 2 kids
That's
who wanted to raise chickens.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, there's obviously many other important issues that we talk about more than just chickens, and we're lucky to have that as a conversation. But there's many things that people have influenced for the better, I think.
That's fantastic. I only got to meet Tim Penny once. My wife was a great admirer of his, and she said that, and it's probably very well known, he had said that he didn't want to continue in D.C. because he didn't want to raise his kids in that atmosphere. And you know, maybe I'm not supposed to say that, but he just, as you were talking about values, he had terrific values. Wonderful man. What a great, you know, spirit, and certainly very down to earth and honest. And honest, I think, is a big word there.
Well, and I know he was very respected as a fiscal budget hawk, and especially on the Democrat side. And there were a couple of Republicans where they were working together, and I remember kind of the opinion shapers of the day were lamenting the loss of saying, "What are we going to do now? We're losing some of our really good leaders on fiscal issues," and Tim Penny was seen as one of them. So. You know, and it's like what you say in terms of money in politics, especially at that level. It's called dialing for dollars, and because of the costs and so many ways that you can, you have to campaign, you have to defend yourself, and so on. Unfortunately, they're spending a lot of their time dialing for dollars or doing it in other ways, and that's unfortunate. So I think he realized, you know, do I want to raise my family in that type of environment? It's very tough. Senator Klobuchar has been very successful at doing it.
Yeah, quality people, very quality.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Shep. And shameless plug time. Shep has read my book, and he's
a good book.
Well, thank you so much.
It's a good book. Thumbs up.
Thank you, sir. Amazon.com. See you next time. Thank you so much. Thanks to Shep.